Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm one of the counselors here, Counselor Davis. Hello, everyone online. Oh, now you can see me. Just thank you for everyone. Thank you for Heather for being able to do this. I reached out to Heather from Mass Audubon once Counselor Merkel and I started kind of digging into this issue after a lot of residents were talking about, Danielle's here in the audience talking about the harms of eschars. We wanted to learn more. I reached out with some questions and she reached back to say, why don't we do a whole event? So that's why we're here today, which is awesome. Thank you to SAFE and CERC for co-sponsoring this event. And I want to introduce Jess, who has Salem Wildlife Rescue, and she's going to tell a story about some of the experience she's had with eschars. So.
It is time.
It is time.
So I'm going to change the slide. There we go.
Awesome. Hi, so my name is Jess. I am a licensed wildlife rehabilitator and the founder and owner of Salem Wildlife Rescue. So we're going to be going over 2 stories of hawks and owls that were found here in Salem. So this first one is our most recent. He was found he or she, in about January, outside of the post office here in Salem. So first thought, what do we see here on the right? What do we notice about this poor little screech owl? Eyes are shut, so he's in pain, of course. And we're also surrounded by trash. So what does that trash attract? Rodents. So this owl was not originally found at the post office. This is just where he took a crash landing. He was found at a local restaurant who does use these rodenticide poisons. This owl fortunately was rehabilitated by Cape Ann Wildlife and did survive to release. I think he was released about a month or so ago. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So this hawk, this red-tailed hawk, was found last year in, I think, May, outside of another restaurant in Salem, just not downtown like the first one. What do we notice about this photo that is a cause for alarm? First look at this hawk right at the face. What are we seeing that's, oh no, there's a problem? The tongue. Correct. Bright yellow. What color are they supposed to be? Pink. Not this. That is second generation anticoagulant rodenticide poisoning. This hawk unfortunately was not so lucky. I had taken these photos to send to the hawk rehabilitator to say, hey, this is what I'm working with. We are on my sidewalk at this point because I can't bring him into my apartment. I'm trying to administer the vitamin K, so the antidote to this. These photos I took to send to her again. 2 minutes after this photo was taken, the hawk starts coughing, spluttering blood, in a shower all over me. You can see I'm in my work clothes at that point. I came right from work, and died in my arms from the rat poison. The restaurant seemed very caring when I was in their parking lot picking up the hawk. Let us know how he's doing. I asked, do you have the rat poison boxes in your restaurant, your facility? They said yes. So as I'm there in that parking lot, phones are being shoved in this hawk's face, not letting me do my job. Eventually get out of there. I call them, hey, hawk died. No one called me back. Out of pocket, I paid for the toxicology on his liver. It did show, I believe, positive for 2 or 3 of the eschars. I called them again and never got a call back. So this story here is kind of what pushed me to being really, really into this. So not only, as a rehabilitator, we care about this. I deal with squirrels, opossums, bunnies, ones that aren't usually affected by the rat poison. So having this experience is what pushed me today to realize something needs to change. As I'm covered in his blood, crying in the sidewalk in front of my house, something needs to change and this isn't okay. Not just for us humans, the rehabilitators who have to brunt the heartache, the financial responsibility, but these animals whose lives depend on this. So that's what I have about our poor little raptor friends today.
Thank you so much, Jess. I really appreciate that. I'm so glad Jess was able to come today and tell kind of that first person story, and especially to bring it home to Salem, that this is right here in your town. Animals are dying from eschar poisoning, all right? So what is that we're going to talk about? So I'm going to give an overview of rodent poison harms, some of the wildlife safe alternatives that we can use to control rodents, because the first time you talk to anyone about not using rodent poisons because they harm wildlife, the first question they're going to ask is, well, then what do we use? So I make sure we talk about that always when I do my presentations, to give you some information. And we have lots of other resources we can provide as well, to hand out some flyers and such about it. We have some strategies to win, though, to get rid of these rodent poisons statewide. And Mass Audubon has a campaign called Rescue Raptors that's helping support that. And it really is a movement. And so I'm going to share all of that with you. And then at the end, the most important is how to get involved. We want everyone here to, and everyone online to join the Save Salem Wildlife Group and work to try and reduce the use of these poisons in your town. All right. So what is the problem? So we have been over-relying on a particular class of rodent poisons. They're called second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides, which is a mouthful. That's why Jess had a hard time saying it, because it's a mouthful. So they came up with an acronym, SCARs. And so you'll hear people, as you get involved in this work, you're going to hear people saying SCARs. That's the acronym for the problem, all right? It's a particular class of poison, and it results in... it's an anticoagulant, right? So it results in the animals bleeding, like Jess's story, because when they take in enough of that poison to be harmed and dying from it, they can't clot, right? But the real problem with this particular class of poison is that it bioaccumulates. It does not break down for months, if not years, all right? So the animals that the rat or the rodent, the animal or mouse that's the target of the poison, eats it, but then the second problem with it is it's slow acting. It takes 2 to 10 days for the rodent to actually die. They walk away fine, and then slowly, they gradually succumb to the symptoms and become more ill. It actually makes them weaker and slower, which is making them easier prey for our predators that would naturally eat rodents. And so they're actually more likely to eat the poison rodents than a healthy, fast one. And it takes 2 to 10 days, so they're like little ticking time bombs. After they've eaten that poison, when they start walking around, if any scavenger goes for them, or a pet, there's reports all the time of pets dying. In fact, right here, when I came in today, we have one of your Salem residents who works for the TV station had a cat die very recently from rodenticide poisoning from eating a mouse that came into his place. So pets and wildlife are at risk or scavengers, like anything that eats that rodent, it's poison to anything else. They become secondary victims. And it's not just like one hawk or one cat or one owl, because there's a New England Wildlife Center gets a lot of these, all right? That single wildlife center is treating hundreds of rodenticide poisoned animals every year. And that's just one. Tufts Wildlife Clinic gets even more. All right. So there's special clinics that can treat these animals. That's why Jess mentioned she's allowed to triage. She's not licensed. There's very strict licensing requirements to handle wildlife. And raptors are particularly unique. And then if it's a threatened raptor, like a bald eagle, then it gets even more specific. It can only go to the New England to the Tufts Wildlife Clinic. So you have to have special training to handle wildlife, like especially these raptors. And to think that hundreds of animals are coming into one wildlife clinic means there are thousands that are being harmed. All right. And you imagine what a tiny fraction of especially wildlife that are, they live in the woods, they're wildlife, right? And so this tiny fraction, less than 5%, are likely to even be found and brought to a wildlife rehabilitator. Jess isn't going to get a call for most of the animals that are getting harmed by these, sadly. They don't even have a chance. Now, there is a antidote. It's a natural coagulant called vitamin K that Jess mentioned that they can give to try to rehabilitate them. It usually takes a couple of weeks, if not months, to get them back to where they're clotting at normal clotting rates. All right?
I should mention, The vitamin K needs to be given every 2 hours around the clock, and that's morning, noon, night. So that's weeks of care that us rehabbers have to give, 24 hours a day.
I'm repeating it for the people online. Jess is mentioning that it takes every 2 hours for weeks, again, or months, the wildlife rehabilitator has to give the vitamin K. So it's not just like one and done. It's not even once a day. It's every 2 hours. So it's a huge amount of effort to save these wildlife. And it's just such a tiny fraction of them that are even getting to the rehabbers too. So it truly is this huge scope of problem. There was a recent study that found 100% of red-tailed hawks tested at a Massachusetts wildlife clinic had eschars in their organs. Over 300 dead bald eagles were found. This is a national study. They tested them. 82% of those bald eagles had been exposed to rodenticides. So this isn't an issue just in Massachusetts, it's nationwide, and there are campaigns going in every state of the nation to try and get rid of the use of these rodenticides. But it's a battle because there is opposition. There are very well-organized pest control companies, lawn care companies, and golf courses. They've organized into a coalition. They have paid lobbyists who work in downtown Beacon Hill in the State House to try and prevent anyone from restricting rodenticides in any way. So in order to overcome their power with their money, we need people power. And that is what tonight is about. And we can do it, and we actually have made headway on it. And I'll be telling you more about it. So just know we need everyone to be paying attention if we're going to save these wildlife from these harms. So what does it actually look like? So this is a box, a eschar box. It's called a bait box because it's bait. So it's tasty, right? The point is to tempt the rodent in, and they make it taste good. And then they lace it with poison. It doesn't taste like poison. It tastes like food. So they're putting out boxes of rat and rodent food, all right, to attract the rodents to the box, which already makes you question the efficacy of this way of catching rodents and doing rodent control, all right? And like I said, they don't die right away. They go in through the little hole at the end, all right, and they come in and eat. Now, rodents, many of you are familiar with other types of rodents. It's a family of animals. What about, what would a squirrel or a chipmunk do if they got food? What do they do with their food? Squirrels and chipmunks. What?
Stash it.
Stash it, exactly. They're hoarders. They take it and they run off with it and they bury it, right? That's their very nature. Most people don't realize that mice and rats are the same family and they do the same thing, all right? You might kind of know that mice do it. If you found a mouse nest ever anywhere, it usually has a little pile of like bits of food. Rats do the same thing. So that poison isn't staying in the box. And that's what pest control companies will often tell you. They'll say it's not dangerous, that it's just in the box, that nobody can get into it. It's in a tamper-resistant box. But it's not true. The poison gets taken out. The boxes often get left and not well maintained, so they get old and brittle, get broken open. They're often by dumpsters, and they get big, the big trash trucks will hit them. I have never had a town or city launch they always end up doing what I call a bait box squad. I was telling you earlier about it, where people walk around and count the number of bait boxes they can find on municipal property. And I have never had a city or town do it yet that hasn't found some that were busted open. So now there's poisoned food out there for any dog or any animal. You don't have to be small enough to get through that little hole anymore. And so we're seeing pets also being poisoned, as I mentioned. The MSPCA clinic treats, just one veterinary clinic in Massachusetts is treating dozens of rodenticide poisoned pets every year. So it isn't just wildlife. All right, so you can spot them often by dumpsters, sadly often by overflowing dumpsters. I took pictures. This is a picture I took by an overflowing dumpster behind a grocery store in my town. I try to always do what I ask volunteers to do before I ask them. So I went out and I walked around to check out, see what eschar boxes I could find. In Massachusetts, they're only required to be labeled if they're indoors. That's state law. So they can be unlabeled, and you can see there's a picture in the corner of one that was. And And so when it's unlabeled, when it is labeled, first of all, I should say, you can see it'll tell the pest control company's name, their phone number, and it will say what their active ingredient is. And the active ingredients are, let you know which chemical of that class of poisons. And you can see right on this that the active ingredient in that box was indeed one of the 4 primary chemicals that make up escars, the class of poison. So that was, and I'm so sorry. Sometimes I feel bad for giving you this information, because now it is one of those things that's once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. You are now going to find bait boxes everywhere. They are truly everywhere. I guarantee you we could walk outside right now and find them all over the place in downtown Salem. They're everywhere. And so, I think there's some really good tactics to be able to know how many are municipal properties. I think it's really great to work with schools. Give that information to your parent-teacher groups. Oh, there's poison boxes on the playground at the elementary school. You're going to get some parent activists to join your group, I guarantee you. We've had really good success, and we've had whole cities get bans as a result of the parent-teacher group stepping in, because there's just a huge number of really passionate activists about not having poison boxes on their playgrounds. So they're in these tamper-resistant bait boxes because there was a movement to try to, because children were getting poisoned. They didn't used to be in tamper-resistant bait boxes, and over 10,000 children a year were being poisoned by rodenticides. And it took activists just like you for years to fight at the federal level in Congress to get a ban on retail sale of rodenticides, and to require them in these child tamper-resistant bait boxes. Sadly, the retail sale ban has a loophole they weren't thinking of probably in 2008, that it is still available for e-commerce, so you can buy it from Amazon. You can buy it online, but you can't buy escars at Home Depot or Ace Hardware, or those kinds of stores. But the vast majority, by far, well over 95%, I am certain, of the escars we see, those bait boxes are put out by licensed pest control companies. You have a rat or rodent problem, you call, they come, they take care of it. So just know, when you do this, if you do end up talking to a property owner, please, please, please give them the benefit of the doubt. So many people, the vast majority of people, have no idea about what we're talking about. They had rats or mice, they called a pest control company who came and took care of it. That's the end of their knowledge, okay? And they don't know what's in the box, and they certainly don't know that what's in the box might also be the reason they have a dead owl in their backyard 2 months later. Or their neighbor's cat dies or something. They don't put all that together. They just don't know. And so I believe that community education is such a critical piece of this. Every property owner, business or homeowner, if they know, most people do care. And especially when they find out there's wildlife safe alternatives, they're willing to switch. You just have to have those conversations with people, and assume the best. You might bump into the hardcore skeptic or opposition occasionally, but if you go in with that open mind and you're being polite and willing to have a dialogue, you do get more with honey than vinegar. The saying, there's a reason for that. So I certainly encourage that. Although I also think, as an activist, we often say you be polite, be persistent, don't give up. Especially if it's a business or a municipality, and you be persuasive. And so we give you as many handouts and flyers and facts that you can use, so that you can be as compelling as possible as you tell these stories. Although none of us will tell it as well as Jess, a wildlife rehabilitator, but you can tell Jess's story. That's why I always have them come and, if I can, tell their story, because now we all have a story to tell about a hawk right here in Salem, right? You have a story now. And stories are such an important part of advocacy. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is called Integrated Pest Management. IPM is the acronym. So the problem was escars and the solution's IPM. I don't know why this world is always acronyms, but I didn't make these up. They exist in this world, so I share them with you because you will hear escars and IPM talked about in this work. All right. Now, integrated pest management is a concept. If you went to an ag school, you'd learn whether you were growing crops or not. It's managing pests, right? You'd have to know how to manage pests, even if it was, corn that you're growing. So this is specifically for rodents. And secondly, it's non-poison, because integrated pest management, by its very nature, if you go online and look it up, you'll see there's these pyramids online. The bottom of the pyramid, I call it last resort, red, is will include eschars. It'll include serious chemicals in any form of pest management that you just learn in standard traditional ag school type materials. So Mass Audubon's version does not include eschars. So it is a non-poison integrated pest management IPM pyramid. And basically the vision of this work is that you're creating an environment where rodents don't like it. It's less inviting to them. All right? They're just less likely to hang out there. We're not talking about getting rodents to go extinct here. We're talking about managing them. We're never going to get rid of mice and we don't want to get rid of mice and rats, right? On the globe, we want them not in our homes. We don't want them as pests. It's pest management, remember, all right? And so we don't want them in our buildings, our restaurants, our homes. But the way to do that is to make your environment less attractive to the rodent in the first place. So you start with exclusion. Let's not, if you can, let's not have them have easy entrances into your home or your building. I totally acknowledge the bigger the building and the older the building, the harder that is. And I think it's a really great piece of work that you can ask a pest control company to do instead of doing the poison boxes. They're going to have a lot of work to do if they're working on exclusion. So it's a great alternative. They still make money. It's a good business model to have pest control companies working on exclusion. Rats can get through a hole the size of a quarter and mice the size of a dime. So keeping them out is a project. Next, you're going to work on starving them. Sanitation is the big piece, right? So we're not going to feed them. So if you do the first two and you don't give them a house and you don't give them food, you're going to have a lot less to deal with at the bottom. But too often, pest control companies come and just put out the eschar box, and they don't deal with the others. They put it next to like I saw it, an eschar box by an overflowing dumpster behind the grocery store, right? And it was open. It wasn't even closed. There was trash laying all around. So if you don't take care of trying to keep them out and trying not to feed them, you're never going to be able to really keep up and your targeting efforts. And targeting them with something like eschars. Eschars are meant to be quick acting. We're looking for long-term solutions to do rodent control, not short-term solutions, right? And so we need to have a long-term plan. And this is what's hard. A lot of people want to take the box out and put in another thing that's wildlife safe. They want a one-to-one swap. And they don't like to hear that they have to do a whole plan on exclusion and sanitation and not just, what can I stick in that box that won't kill owls? That's what they're wanting, just a quick swap of the one poison maybe for some other product that's not poisonous. I don't know. It's just not that easy, and that's hard sometimes to help people understand. But there are once you get to the target level, I'm going to have another slide on this, but there's a lot of things we can get into. I have to always mention raptors themselves. It's free rodent control, all right? Raptors can eat, a family of hawks or owls will eat thousands of rodents a year. So to kill the actual solution to the problem is so crazy, all right, to me. And that's what we're doing all the time in any urban setting, especially where there's these bait boxes around everywhere. So exclude, seal the entrances, especially where cables and pipes come through. A lot of people put steel wool around them, but you can ask your pest control company to do the exclusion work for you. Most pest control companies are very familiar with it, and more of them have heard. There's customer demand is increasing for non-eschar rodent control, and so they're becoming more familiar with these alternatives every day. And there's a few companies even that exist that just are completely committed to not using eschars. They become full-on allies in this movement and won't use eschars even if asked, which is great. And a couple of them are on North Shore, but I'm not promoting as Mass Audubon the particular names. But we could ask later if you're interested. Monitoring is a really important part of exclusion because the bigger and more complex and older the building is, the harder to know where to exclude. Where are those rodents getting in? So we at Drumlin Farm, we have 21 nature centers in Mass Audubon, We don't use escars on any of them, all across the state. And Drumlin Farm even has, it's a farm. It has livestock. I don't know if any of you've been to the Drumlin Farm in Lincoln, but it has livestock. So we have livestock feed, we have chickens, like all kinds of things that would attract rodents and do attract rodents. And so we're managing rodents. And one of the ways we do that is, it's a product called Lumatrack, but it's bait that is not poison. Okay. Can't say that enough. It is not poison at all, but it does have a product in it that makes the rodent droppings glow under a black light, which always kind of cracks me up to imagine like the pest control company coming back with their black light running around looking for glowing poo. But that's what they're doing. And they then know kind of where the hot spot is, like where are there more rodent droppings? And that's where they need to focus their attention for putting out snap traps, which is what we use, and for exclusion work. Like, oh, it's that corner. Maybe there's a hole. How are they getting in? And so on a big and complicated property like Drumlin Farm, we have a barn, lots of buildings, all kinds of things, camp, tons of things going on. Being able to monitor, I think, is a really effective tool for larger municipalities and bigger businesses. Non-toxic repellents, I think, is mainly more for homeowners or smaller businesses. We do use that at Broadwater Brook in Worcester, which is downtown Worcester. We have a big, huge jug with a spray nozzle that's with spearmint spray because rodents don't like spicy things. So again, it just makes it less attractive. They kind of walk by and think, oh, that smells bad, and go back out in the woods, right? Like it just makes them less likely to try to come in. It's not going to prevent it, but you're trying to make it less appealing. I've even, in Ipswich River, they've used hot sauce on the car wires, which I think have soy in them now. There's something, has anyone had mice chewing the wires of their car? They've started putting some product in the coating of the wire. And we had that trouble at Ipswich River Wildlife Sanctuary, and they put hot sauce on them, and it helped. And now they haven't had that trouble since. Raptors Are the Solution is actually the name of a nonprofit in California who got a statewide ban on rodenticides a couple of years ago. And they were critical in that organization helping make that happen. And they have tons of free outreach materials on their website, including this flyer. There's another one for restaurants. So I definitely encourage you to go check out their outreach materials. They have so much great free stuff. And at Mass Audubon, I was like, we're not recreating the wheel here. We just use it all the time. We love it. So starving them. So sanitation. So we need to not have food out. So the big thing is trash. Boston actually has a Boston Rat Action Plan they came out with last summer. And they spent like a year. They hired this expert from New York City to come in, with a PhD and rodents, and did all these surveys of all the neighborhoods and communities, and wrote a Boston Rat Action Plan that actually says that without addressing sanitation, many studies have shown that escars are 100% ineffective. That's right in this plan. You can find it online if you look up Boston Rat Action Plan. And after that plan came out and they published it, Boston pulled all escars from municipal property, the exception being sewers, the last I heard, although John Ulrich, who is the Assistant Commissioner of Facilities in Boston, was trying to figure that one out too. So Boston doesn't. And I have to mention Lowell passed a citywide municipal ban on February 4th. So I say, if Boston and Lowell can do it, Salem can too. All right. And so sanitation is huge, though, for this. Like the single biggest factor for a more urban setting like Salem, probably. All right. So how do we get rid of having trash out? So I don't know anything about this is one of the things when you guys meet, you might talk about how trash is handled in the city. But having trash cans, first of all, Boston doesn't even have trash cans issued by the city all the time. People just put open trash bags on the curb, just the bag, which is like a buffet all night for the rodents, or by day if they're extra, brave. So you really do need to have them in trash cans, and ideally rodent-proof ones that are at least really heavy-duty plastic. On the green ones on this slide are ones that were just issued in my town like 3 months ago. And because of this work I'm doing, I had actually bought a metal trash can because my lighter weight plastic one that I bought at home at Ace Hardware had a hole about the size, of a mouse. I was like, I've got to practice what I'm preaching here. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm totally feeding mice out of my trash can. So I went out and bought a metal one. And then like 3 months later, the town issued these. And so we had to pay for them. But we all have the same kind. And then they were very happy too, because they were able to now have the machine that picks them up and dumps it, and they don't have to get out to do it anymore. when they pick up trash. So we have trash and recycling in heavy-duty plastic. Although I have heard anecdotally, I think Somerville did this as well, but like multiple years ago, they issued them partly for rodent control issues. And someone I know told me that they already have a hole in theirs because rats can chew through that heavy-duty green. It's the green plastic that your recycle bins used to be, like when you used to have the smaller ones. It's that heavy green plastic. Rats are tough. They can get in. So, maybe they have to reissue it or have some program to address the fact that if it's damaged, how to get a new one. The other thing you can look at is trash on the city streets. So I'm sure Salem, especially with all your activities you do in the fall here, have lots of trash barrels of different, whatever variety, all up and down your city streets, right? Because you have to manage trash. There's going to be, I don't even know how many people come to your city. I did it once and I was like, oh my gosh. I came like 2 days before Halloween one year.
2 million in October.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, they were a lot. 2 million people. All right. You got to manage trash. But as much as possible, if you can have that trash in metal barrels that automatically close, you're not creating a buffet, or dumpsters that close really well and have people monitoring the dumpsters. But you need to really try year-round, but obviously you have particular challenges in October, to manage your trash. In Waltham, they've been really working to get these as well because they have Moody Street, a really popular restaurant district in Waltham. And what's really common in a lot of towns and cities are the trash cans. And I didn't look when I was driving through town just now to see what you guys have. But a lot of trash cans that have the umbrella kind of dome lid, so they're open on the side though. So those are also rat buffets. And so, because it's open all night, right? Or day, again. These are big belly trash compactors, and a lot of cities and towns have been going to these all across the U.S., actually. They're metal, and they automatically close when you pull the handle down and let go. It closes when you let go, like a mailbox would or something, right? So that's a great option for cities and towns to, obviously it takes money and funding, but to work toward. Dumpsters, I can't say enough, having really solid dumpsters. And one of the other things that some of the communities have done is they've been doing sanitation brigades. The volunteers have, who are part of their Save Wildlife chapter. And they go around and they find, gradually they have learned who the worst offenders are who don't maintain their dumpsters, because you can report that to your Board of Health if they're not maintaining their dumpster properly and they're leaving it open and it's overflowing and it's a mess. And so I think we actually might have online your Board of Health agent, right?
Yes.
So you could report it to your Board of Health agent and tell them if you see dumpsters that aren't well maintained, it is the responsibility of the property owner to do so. And what they have found is they're repeat offenders. As you do this more, some people after they get the first time they get reported, we'll take care of it from then on and be better. Others will be repeat offenders, and it's really good to know, right? So you could kind of come up with a plan to work on as a sanitation brigade, where you kind of go around and try. Who knew? And I'll tell you that your local DPW or facilities staff will be so surprised to have activists helping around trash issues. That is not the type of topic that usually people organize, activists get involved in, right? So they're like, what? And they can be your best allies in this work. To do this. So the last two things I'll mention are gardens and bird feeders. So community gardens or backyard gardens, if you have food, it's food, right? So you need to do your best to pick up the drops. Don't let those rotted tomatoes just lay there. You can plant spearmint around the outside. Again, they of course can get through, but they think it smells bad. They don't like it, so they're more likely to just wander off and not visit your garden. If you have compost, try and have it in a closed composting system like this one, which is hard. If it's a big farm, they do big cement slabs underneath it, so the rats can't actually burrow underground and live under the compost pile, where they have their house and their food all in one place. So there's techniques for even big gardens or big farmers to be able to handle large compost piles that are being turned with a bulldozer. And then bird feeders is always the hardest for Mass Audubon. Got a lot of birders. We like our birds. So if you have a standard bird feeder and you've done nothing to control rodents, which includes squirrels and chipmunks. And so some people have already done things, not realizing they're also, if you've done anything to try and prevent squirrels and chipmunks, you also have already done things that are preventing mice and rats, just so you know. It's all the same. If you do one, you do the other. But some of the techniques that you can use, You can have a catcher, because what's really attracting them at first is that all the drops that are on the ground. Because the mice are primarily, and rats are on the ground, they will, once they discover there's food there, they'll climb the tree and get into the bird feeder. But if you can try and keep as much of the drops off the ground, you're less likely to attract them in the first place. So there's catchers you can put. You can also buy pre-hulled bird seed. It does cost a little more, but a lot of the drops are because the bird themselves, they have their beaks. They have different kinds of beaks, all the different birds that might come to your bird feeder, and some of them are trying to hull things they can't, or even if they do hull it, they drop the hull. The other thing is to buy ones that have no millet, because millet is really just a filler for bird seed. Most birds don't eat it, so they are just kicking it out. And you know when they kick it out, who's eating it? The rodents. And that's the bulk of the litter that goes underneath a bird feeder is actually millet. So it's really great to get the no millet, no hulled. It helps a lot. You can also pull on a pulley, depending on where you have it. Pulleys are a great way. You can lower it and put your food in and raise it up. So it's not as, then the rodent can't just climb the tree and jump onto it or climb the pole. And then the last thing I always mention, because Mass Audubon is a big believer in building healthy habitat, whether it's in your backyard or your patio or your balcony, depending on where you live. But you can actually, instead of having a bird feeder, just plant the trees and plants, have the habitat that will attract the birds naturally without actually having a bird feeder. And their whole webpage is dedicated to that on Mass Audubon's website, on National Audubon's website. It's a big part of what Audubon teaches, is having natural habitats that attract and are healthy for your animals. All right, so target. All right, so now we don't have a home and we don't have food. What are we gonna do? We still have some left, because that inevitably is what's gonna happen, all right, in most settings. So I have to mention raptors, of course. You can target them with raptors, have raptor-friendly habitat, which means non-eschar habitat. The top two are more likely used in smaller businesses or homes, snap traps and electronic traps. And the reason is that with a snap trap or electronic trap, it's one rat at a time and its carcass has to be removed. One of the reasons why the bigger commercial businesses and municipalities like eschars is the rat runs away and they don't have to remove carcasses one at a time. Battling rodents control one rodent at a time is not always going to be realistic. I think you're not going to be able to sell it, I think, very often to a municipality or a large commercial. Although there are exceptions. Jody Swenson, an activist, got Hall Properties that owns Whitney Field in Leominster with the big market basket and mall and everything to switch to snap traps. So it is possible, but I think it's a harder sell for sure. So Mass Audubon uses snap traps a lot. We also do use electronic traps. Couple things to note about those. Snap traps, rats are really fast and smart, way more than mice. So you have to usually have some kind of contraption where the rat goes in it straight, or they can actually grab the bait and run away with a snap trap. So you can see some of these. In fact, North Shore Wildlife, Bob Linscott, those are his hands on the top. North Shore Wildlife is one of the dedicated no eschars pest control companies, and Bob actually designed that one. Rodents love, rats actually do burrow underground, so they love tunnels, and so that's like a tunneling system for them, and it catches them. So it's very effective if you do it right. Electronic traps, there's the little ones we use at kind of Broadmeadow Brook sometimes. Basically, the rodent comes in, and as they're eating the non-poison bait, you just bait it with like anything, like crackers and peanut butter, like we all do different baits. You bait it, and then as they eat the bait, their feet, though, because it's positioned in such a way, will close a circuit, and there is a battery in it, or it's plugged in, and it will electrocute them, and they die pretty quickly. But it is, you do have to remove the rodent. The smart electronic traps is the tower, the silver tower. It can take 10 rats and 40 mice, and it's smart because it's connected to the pest control company's phone. An app on their phone will tell them when it's full. So some cities have used these, certainly businesses, homeowners who are in an urban setting. These have been quite popular because their pest control company is still managing it, and they don't have to worry about the carcasses, and it can catch more than one, which is nice. But I will say at a municipal level, to have like the whole city go to it, a few cities have tried out as like a pilot and have found they were not financially, it didn't make sense, because it's still it's still the battle of like one rodent at a time, right? And the labor cost was too much. So the two that I've seen most big cities leaning into are rodent contraceptives, which is new. Came out about 2.5 years ago now. When I first heard about it, I was like, what? I was so tiny little birth control pills. Like, I was like, what is this? So I've watched tons of videos and read tons about it. So basically, when it first came out, ContraPest had a liquid version, and it looked like a rabbit hutch water where they drank out of it. And it had the contraceptive in the liquid for both the male and the female rats. And they are infertile for 45 days. So this, I think, rodent contraceptive has a lot of opportunity to build into a new and healthier pest control company business model, because they would still need to be serviced regularly, but instead of servicing an eschar box once a month and putting out more poison, they could be servicing a rodent contraceptive box. There's still a lot of questions about it. It's so new. So they've been doing studies. Boston had a trial in Jamaica Plain for a year that finished last August. And I went to a hearing in Boston in October to hear about the results from that. And I think it was mixed results. Anecdotally, there were a lot of good stories like, oh, I have backyard chickens and I've had no rat problems after a year. Rodent contraceptives are slow acting. It's the long-term solution for a long-term problem, right? You're not going to see an immediate drop when you use rodent contraceptives. But one of the challenges is I find with a lot of people who've been trying to do these, a lot of cities, Newton is using it, a ton of it. Newton hasn't used eschars on municipal property for a decade. Josh Morris was hired as their facilities director 10 years ago and said, why are we doing this? And just remove them. So I lean in and ask Josh a lot of questions sometimes because he has so much experience with it, right? He's just done it for so long. So Jamaica Plains was using Good Bites, which is the tan one with the little pellets in it. That's kind of a competitor that came out more recently. Right now, Somerville and Cambridge have a trial going on with a product called Evolve, which is basically, when ContraPest came out with the liquid version, they didn't think through the fact that you can imagine, last month, if you had that, would it be working? It was frozen. So Brookline tried it and told me they were efficacy issues. And I thought, well, that sounds fancy. What's that mean? And they were like, it froze. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Especially this winter. It was probably frozen for weeks and weeks, right? So anyway, so ContraPest then came out with that company that made ContraPest came out with another product called Evolve. They call it pellets, but to me it looks like little sausages. The guy with the blue glove is holding the little, again, pellets from Evolve. Somerville and Cambridge are doing a pilot program right now using Evolve. So what I've heard is there is indications that it works, but they haven't done I haven't heard of a test yet that's been broad enough that they really, because it's an open environment. So if you don't, when the one they did in Jacob Plains was like 31 houses on one street. It wasn't the whole neighborhood. So inevitably, some fertile ones came in and infertile ones went out. And they have cameras on the bait boxes to evaluate it. They won't always do this, but for the sake of this trial, they did. And they were evaluating the number of juvenile rodents that were eating at the bait box. And they did see a decrease. So they were talking about doing another trial. I haven't followed up with them recently to find out like what they're doing in Boston, but rodent contraceptives, really interesting, possibly exciting new area, and I think there'll be a lot more competition growing in the market for this because there is growing demand. New York City's been using them for years too. The next one is carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide sprayers. So carbon dioxide is more commonly used for obvious reasons. Spraying carbon monoxide has some challenges for human safety, and they have very strict regulations about how close to any building or residence that you can do that. But the CO2 sprayers, which is a motor because that produces CO2, it's just a motor. It has, in this picture, it's the green one in the middle, kind of higher with the black tubing on the handle. That one has, basically what happens is The rodents live underground in burrows. They have holes about the size of a tennis ball. You have a pest control company come and find the burrows. And Boston has leaned into this, and so is Newton. Like a lot of cities are really leaning into this one. And they find the burrows and they pump the CO2 down into the burrow. So you're getting a ton of rodents, rats, all at once. You don't have to dispose of them because they're already buried. It doesn't smell bad, so they're not like running all charging out of it, you know. They just die under there and you get a ton at once. And it takes care of it. I also know farmers, I've done this presentation out at cities out west, and some of the bigger farmers are using it who are battling rats in you know, when they have huge chicken coops and things, right? So CO2 sprayers have become quite popular as a wildlife safe alternative. Carbon monoxide is the tank there. So either one of those could be something you guys could look at. And then dry ice is just frozen CO2. And so I think that's a little more commonly like used even in homes who have chickens in the backyard, or if they live in you guys are in an urban setting. So like if you live downtown and there's a dumpster for the restaurant right next door, you might have rats burrows in your yard and the out back. Rats live in the ground, underground. So you might not have realized that hole the size of a tennis ball was a rat burrow, but it probably is. And so you could have a pest control company put dry ice down it. They will call it rat ice and charge you more, though, I will say. If you do try to DIY this, please be careful. You can't handle dry ice, and you don't want that to melt and evaporate off, and you have the gas in your car or your house. So be very careful with any handling of dry ice. But it is the same kind of dry ice that's used for theater productions and things. I mean, people do handle it. You just have to be careful. And the pest control companies do know how to use this and will use it, though, if you ask them to do dry ice, if you have burrows. So the last two I'll mention as last resort is only after you've done everything else and it doesn't work, all right? And that is that red part of the pyramid. And the two products we say, the first one we prefer is basically corn gluten meal, which is Radex or Mousex is the brand. And you can imagine it's corn gluten meal, so their bodies completely metabolize it really quickly. There's no secondary impact at all if a rat dies from that. And I'm not going to get into all how it works tonight, but there's reasons why eating a ton of corn gluten meal kill a rodent. But anyway, there's absolutely no secondary impacts. So I don't know. Sometimes, though, the product puts a lot of salt in their bait to desiccate the mouse afterwards, so it won't smell. And I've heard anecdotally that sometimes the rats won't eat it as well because it doesn't taste as good. And they've had to add like peanut butter to the bait, which is not going to work at a commercial or municipal level. Homeowners, small businesses might be able to do that. Although I will say my town uses Radex on all municipal property in Concord, Mass, where I live. So it's working. That's what they use on all their... When I walked around my town, I didn't find any Ascar boxes on any municipal property, and then I contacted our facilities director, who did not know, and this is very common, when you contact the people, the property owners, whether it's municipal or private, they often don't know what's in those boxes, and he didn't. He had to get a hold of the pest control company to find out. So corn gluten meal is one. And then as a very last resort, if you have someone who absolutely will not buy into any of this, or you have a seriously bad infestation, like horrible, the last one I would say is vitamin D3, but it is... So it's a massive overdose of it, which causes, again, things to happen in their bodies that's not good, but you can tell that it would naturally metabolize, and there's not secondary impacts shown really to other animals that would eat that dead rodent. But vets and wildlife rehabbers hate vitamin D3 that I've talked to anyway about this because it has no antidote. Remember, escars have vitamin K antidote? Vitamin D3 the brands are Decon or Terad 3. That's the name of the poison that you can buy. And you can buy those at Ace Hardware or Home Depot. And a lot of their cities, I mean, Watertown has switched all their escars up and down the city streets to this because they just chose to do that after they got a little advocacy on them, and then they did it without the advocates actually advocating specifically for that. It just happened, which is kind of a win. But we're not super fans either because vitamin D3 is particularly lethal if ingested directly by another animal. directly. So if that bait box is busted open and a dog gets into it, they're just going to die. There is absolutely no antidote that they could try to bring back the animal. But I will say I have yet to ask a wildlife vet or any vet if you have to choose between, for rodent control, an eschar or vitamin D3. They've all said vitamin D3. So that's why we say it as a last resort. And Mass Audubon, again, I'm trying to be honest and practice what we preach. We have used it at Broadmeadow Brook in Worcester, downtown Worcester, big nature center. We've struggled with rats sometimes, but you use it indoors, short term, carefully monitored. It only took 6 weeks, and we'd done everything else in the pyramid first, all right? And it didn't work. And we used it for 6 weeks, and that was like a year and a half ago, and we've never had a rat since. So it isn't a long-term business model for that pest control company, which is one of the reasons they don't like it. When you don't use eschars, we didn't sign a contract for them to come back every month and service our eschar boxes because we told them no eschars. Instead, they came and they put out vitamin D3, and 6 weeks later, we didn't have any rodents, and we haven't had them back, right? So wildlife safe alternatives exist, and most people just don't know about it. Don't use glue traps. They catch all kind of animals, not just rodents. They're horrible. I know I just talked about how to kill rodents. It seems like I'm all pro killing rodents, but I'm not actually advocating for torturing rodents, okay? I'm advocating for controlling them in a wildlife safe and humane way. And it's completely inhumane, glue traps are, so please don't use those. And they do trap all kinds of birds or chipmunks and other animals. All right, so how are we gonna win? Clearly, now you've heard all kinds of stuff. We gotta get rid of this stuff. So there's 2 statewide strategies that exist right now where we could have a win. Either one of them happen, we'll all be out of a job for this. We won't have to be advocates around rodenticides anymore. Statewide, there would be no more rodenticides allowed. First is the Massachusetts Pesticide Board has a subcommittee that licenses pest control companies to use rodenticides. They license all pesticides, not just that, but that's one of the things they've licensed. So if the Pesticide Board subcommittee were to suspend that license for rodenticides, pest control companies wouldn't be allowed to use it, right? So that sounds easy. It's not that easy though. So basically advocacy is needed to make that happen, and it's already started. Last May, a group of advocates and wildlife rehabilitators, including Cape Ann Wildlife, were very involved. Jess, were you involved? Okay. They partnered up with Harvard Law School's Animal Law and Policy Clinic and submitted a incredibly well-written, as you can imagine, legal petition on MDAR's Massachusetts Department of Agriculture Resources is the umbrella for the pesticide board. And they sent to MDAR a petition asking them to suspend the registration of these rodenticides. They sent that last May. Over the summer, they had one meeting. There were a few people there. This pesticide board meets about 4 times a year, I think. So they met once last summer, and there were some activists there. But boy, in the fall, they, I think, wonderfully invited Jane Newhouse from Newhouse Animal Rescue to come and present. They had no idea what was about to happen. Hundreds of activists showed up. Half of the screen was reactions, thumbs ups. It's like the whole time she was talking. This is a 9-person committee no one's ever heard of. No one attends. Who attends? It is an open public meeting. It's on the Massachusetts Pesticide Board Subcommittee website. It has the Zoom link whenever they schedule it. And there actually is a meeting coming up tomorrow, is one of their meetings. If you go to their website, you can attend. It's from tomorrow morning from 9 to 11. I just log in. I want them to know I'm watching. I might not actively watch the whole 2-hour meeting, but they have an agenda, and toward the end of the agenda, they're going to do a quick update on what's going on with rodenticides. Basically, they had to respond to this petition because it was sent, and then there was tons of activism around it. And MDAR found the money to hire a third-party company to come in and review the data. Cape Ann Wildlife, Tufts Wildlife Clinic, tons of rehabbers have been sending them data about the harms to wildlife. And they are going to do a scientific review, which is the first step that they have. It's a bureaucracy. They have a process to suspend. They don't just vote on it. So they have a process. They've done it before. on other things. So this is the first step, scientific review. They're going to get a report sometime this summer. And then the next step is what they call an independent or an individual review. And the pesticide board themselves looks at that scientific report and they debate that and will eventually make a decision whether or not they're going to suspend it. It absolutely will not happen without activists paying attention and going to those meetings. So just like let it run on your side screen while you might be doing other things, you know, and they will see all those people, hundreds of people at every meeting. They're going to be like, what the heck? I told you, like 9 people on the committee, they have never had that kind of attendance.
9 a.m.?
9 a.m. tomorrow, yeah. All right. Second strategy. There's a bill. Some of you might have heard of it. So Rep. Hawkins from Attleboro and Senator Moore from Worcester have filed a bill that is called the Act Restricting the Use of Rodenticides in the Environment. And it basically will ban the use of rodenticides statewide. They're always, with every municipal ban and this statewide bill, there's always the caveat, though, that the local Board of Health, if it's municipal, for the statewide one, it's the Department of Public Health, but they have the authority, the bill, even if passed, gives the Department of Public Health the authority to make an exception for a public health emergency. And you would need that in a Salem municipal ban too. I've never seen one. Lowell's, we have examples on our in our Rescue Raptor toolkit that you have access to, and I will share with everyone of the ones that have passed in other cities and towns. But the Board of Health really does need to be an ally and a partner in this work, and they need to have the authority to make an exception if there's a big problem, or it will never pass. All right, and that's really important. And this bill already has that written into it as well. Right now, what can we do to try and advocate for this bill? Well, it is a bill. It's going to go through the process of how a bill becomes a law in Massachusetts. So right now, there's 2 things kind of happening. First, the minute it was filed in January, we could start asking all our legislators to co-sponsor it. And we now have 87 co-sponsors, the last I checked. There are 200 legislators in Massachusetts. So that's pretty good, actually. That's really good for a bill at this early in the process. We're pretty happy, but it's not all of them, so we still want more. But we are continuing to encourage advocacy to get co-sponsors. And we sometimes call this the Friends and Family Program, because it might be that your legislator has, but maybe you have a friend or a family member who's in one of the towns. Yes?
Do you have the full list there? Because
I don't have
our
it.
State rep and senator.
I know.
You know? Oh, great.
Manny Cruz has already signed on.
Okay.
The last time I checked, Joan Lovely had not.
Okay.
And I sent her a second message just reminding her.
So tell me the names again so I can repeat it for people online.
Manny Cruz.
Manny Cruz.
Is the congressman.
Okay. It's
State
a
rep.
State rep.
Manny Cruz has.
He has signed on.
He has
yes.
signed on, you say. Okay.
Yes. Senator Joan Lovely had not.
Senator Joan Lovely might need a little nudge. All right, so you can send emails, and you can do it from Mass Audubon's website. We have a Take Action Center where you can just click a button, and it's the quickest little email. It's already pre-written, and you click submit. It automatically knows based on your address who to send it to, who's your rep and senator, so it'll go automatically. But the other thing that's going on with the bill is that they did indeed form the joint committees, which was one of the steps of how a bill becomes law, is bills get assigned by topic to a joint committee under their category. So this bill is about the environment, so it got assigned to the Joint Committee for Environment and Natural Resources. It's a joint committee because there's some senators and some representatives on it. There's 17 total members of this joint committee. Of them, 11, last time I checked, and it could be wrong because I didn't check today. It has been going pretty quick. But last I checked, there were 11 of the 17 had co-sponsored. And so we had 6 more, and I have them on this slide. Those are the 6 that hadn't yet. And if, again, friends and family, if there's anyone you know who happens to live in those cities and towns, you could reach out to them and ask them to reach out to their legislator to co-sponsor the bill. It is possible that Senator Roush, she's the chair of the committee. She doesn't always, in the past, she has not. While she's also often an advocate and in favor and supports these bills that are around the environmental issues, she's often an ally with Mass Audubon's priorities. She tends to not actively co-sponsor bills that are going to fall under her committee. So it might be she'll be our ally and eventually support it, but she might not co-sponsor, I don't know. But it doesn't hurt to ask her to, so she knows a ton of her constituents want her to support that bill anyway. Because that, right now, the power is in those 17 people's hands. This bill will get a hearing and then a vote by that committee. And if it doesn't get out of committee, if they vote it what they call for further study, that means it died in committee. It's really just kind of a euphemism. So we want this bill to get sent out of committee to the floor of the House and Senate for full debate by all representatives and senators, right? It might never see the floor if these 17 people don't let it out of committee. Last year, there was a bill for Newton and Arlington. We're working on a home rule petition to ban escars on municipal property, on private property. And those did get out of committee, which we were very excited about. So, and it's, Senator Roush was actually the chair last year too. Some of the members have changed, but she was there last year. So, so hopefully it'll get out of committee. It will likely get a hearing. Definitely will get a hearing at some point. We're hoping that it will get one early, like maybe even April or May. We often only get 3 days notice. So if you want to submit written testimony in support of this bill, what I would encourage you to do is to consider drafting your testimony now. And I definitely am, I don't know if you were at the RAM conference. There was a Wildlife Rehabilitators of Massachusetts conference this weekend, and I spoke because I think every wildlife rehabilitator should be sending a picture and a story about an animal that was hurt by rodenticides. First-person stories are going to be so impactful. But we can share their stories and we can tell how we care about wildlife and nature too. And so everyone should be sending written testimony. It sounds fancy. All it is an email. They make it sound so fancy when they say written testimony, but it's just an email. We will be telling you as you signed up today. For people online, you've already signed up. We have your emails because you had to register to join this call. For anyone in person, if you register here, you'll get an email from us about when that hearing's coming, and we'll tell you exactly who to send it to, and we'll give you a couple of bulleted talking points that you could draft into an email to keep it simple. If you wanted to do verbal testimony, you read your email, you pick it up, and you read it. And you can do it virtually, like I'm doing online with people right now. They have a very functional online hearing system, so you can do it virtually. Or you could come and meet me and do it in person, because I will definitely be there that day, and a bunch of other activists will, and it'll be a lot of fun. And we will read our emails. You read it and then you send it via email. If you do the verbal, they still want it in writing too. But it's all just short and sweet. They aren't looking for huge, long, and repetitive stories. All right. So that we have a co-sponsor tracker and a document that we're keeping up to date that's also all in our Rescue Raptor toolkit. You'll get that. Everything is in one place in our toolkit. So we have a campaign. We're trying to phase it out. We have all these strategies. This is what a campaign looks like when you're organizing around anything. So this is our Rescue Raptor one, and we're going to have a lobby day in July. That'll be one of our tactics we're going to do. And everyone can go to Boston and meet with their legislators around the rodenticide bill. There is a law on the books right now that says that cities and towns do not have the authority to restrict escars on private property. So the way you manage that in your town is totally different than municipal. That's why we've been talking about municipal bans, banning escars on municipal property. Cities and towns can just do it, and they have been. I know of 24 right now who've reduced escar use on municipal property. And I think about 13 or so are working on it. And that's the ones I know, and honestly, this movement has gotten outside of my ability to have my arms around it. I'm hearing from people, Rockport, actually, I just heard from a select board member in Rockport a month ago or so who said, I didn't know him, I had no volunteers that I knew of in Rockport. I knew nothing was going on there, but somehow he heard about me and decided to let me know, which was great, that Rockport had passed a municipal ban. And I was like, oh, that's great. So towns and cities are just doing it sometimes without even telling me, and they don't need to. They don't need me to make it happen, and that means it's a movement, and I'm thrilled. I've been working on it for 2 years, doing this presentation, and now it's gotten to the point that some people just know about it and are working on it without needing me to do a kickoff. So that's wonderful. We have lots of tools to help people educate property owners. We have tools to help you pass a municipal ban. And then the last thing you can do is pass what's called a home rule petition. And your city councilors and your legislators are very familiar with home rule petitions. It's a tool that the state has that allows cities and towns to ask for an exemption to state law. And they are used for all kinds of different situations and issues, completely unrelated to this, and used very commonly, okay? That's why all your city councilors and like local officials and your legislators are familiar with it. A home rule petition does become a bill, though. It gets filed and it goes through the process for how a bill becomes a law, but it would basically say that Salem is requesting authority to restrict eschars on private property. It's asking for authority. It's not saying it's going to do it. It's not saying when or how or if even. It's just asking for the exemption, the permission to do so, an exemption from that state law. And so 6 towns and cities have passed that through their either city council or select boards and are filing them right now. Some have already, I think 4 are actively already filed and 2 are working through their town clerk has to send paperwork off and things. And then I know of 7 other cities and towns that have them on the as an article on the warrant for town meetings, because those do have to go through town meeting. So for cities like yours, sometimes it could be quicker, but for town people with town meetings, it's like once or twice a year is all you can do it, so it's different. But we certainly will help support that in any way we can, because every home rule petition gets filed, the same legislators, the Joint Committee for Environment and Natural Resources, are going to hear that hearing, and guess what? Every time one gets filed, those same activists against rodenticides are going to march in and testify again, and they're going to be like, oh. And what we really want is for them, and we've seen success on other issues with this, where if more and more cities and towns are passing these all across the state legislators who are having to hear about it are like, okay, we need a statewide solution. We don't want to have town after town doing the same thing all across the state. So here we are. We've handed them the solution on a silver platter. We already got Rep. Hawkins and Senator Moore to file the ban. So they could just vote for it, and then we'd be done, and we wouldn't need home rule petitions anymore. So that's what we're hoping. It's kind of a tactic to push that state bill through, in addition to possibly passing and letting Salem restrict it on private property. But whether or not it restricts on private property and whether or not it were to get through as a bill is a part of a big statewide strategy. Is very effective, I think. So we have a toolkit, lots of resources. It's a Google Doc. They're all hyperlinked. It's sorted. Lots of information in here. I would encourage you to use the hyperlinks. I'll be sending this link to this document. Anyone who's been working with me already has seen it. But if you're just getting started, I encourage you to start on page 8, which is called Getting Started. And so Mass Audubon continues to support local advocacy all across the state with advice, connections to other advocacy groups. We amplify your local campaign by promoting it with our members in your town. I go all over and do this speaking gigs. I maintain the toolkit. I maintain a municipal team tracker that is a spreadsheet that lists every city and town in Massachusetts and tells how it looks like this. Tells you which towns have already kind of launched a group. And so right now I know of 68 community groups organizing in Massachusetts, 23 towns who've reduced eschar use, and then the home rule petition group that I mentioned. So this is what the map of it looks like. So some are well established, launched. Some of them launched before Mass Audubon got involved. I'm very clear this is a map of the rodenticide movement, not Mass Audubon's work, because this has been going on for like a decade. And before I was even an employee of Mass Audubon, right? And so some towns had launched. Save Arlington Wildlife was one of the first. And so there's some that kind of help seed the other ones. I think that's partly why you see kind of little hubs sometimes where there's one town and then multiple little towns around it, because they tend to go like that. And so we have some that are well established and launched and been around, some for years, but many of them are just getting established and launching. And then a lot of interest. And I have yet, in some of the towns you can see, there's a lot who've attended a meeting or expressed some interest, but I haven't yet jumped in to really try and organize. So Save Salem Wildlife, do you want to come up and talk?
Sure.
Or you can join me. We can talk together. So everyone knows you already. You introduced yourself?
Yes.
All right. So tell them about Save Salem Wildlife.
All right. We made this Gmail an hour and a half ago. So obviously I'm supportive of bringing this before the council. I'll obviously vote for it. I'm one of 11 counselors. so we need your help in nudging all the other counselors in the right way to support a home rule petition. That's why we got people's emails. And so I think what that advocacy looks like depends on the people in this room, right? We talked about maybe a petition, maybe just emailing people, your counselors. Maybe we're standing outside a Market Basket, spreading a petition online, maybe all the above. But, I think an advocacy campaign is kind of needed here.
Great.
I don't know what else you want me to get into.
No, that's good. So I am a guest speaker, to be clear. So when you email savesalemwildlife@gmail.com, it will initially be your councilman here checking, and eventually maybe he'll be delegating
Pass it off to one of you.
to one of the volunteers who's interested in helping support this work, right?
Kyle, introduce yourself.
Yeah, what board are you with?
I am an at-large counselor, Kyle Davis, Counselor Davis. Yes.
So I hope that everyone is, if you're from Salem, might consider joining the Salem group. If I know there's some people probably online, I don't know if there's any in the room who aren't from Salem, you're welcome to reach out to me. We have Rescue Raptor brochures that look like this on the table. I'll be sending a follow-up email, or someone from your group will, but there'll be a follow-up email with links to all the information that I talked about that'll go out to everybody. After, it'll probably take a couple days. I'll include a downloaded recording. So we'll have the recording and the slides that were shared today as well sent out to everyone. All right, so next is, these are all the ways to get involved that I've talked about. There'll be links to all of that, and I want to take questions. So I'm quickly going to check and see if there's questions online. You have some greetings, people online who know you. Are there any questions? Does anyone online, if you want to put your questions in the chat, please, that would be great. And if not, I don't see any questions.
I was not able to get into the Zoom because it had already started. I don't know if there's a way to send him something, but
okay, it's probably too late at this point. All right, so I'm going to just share a few things with those online. Does anyone in the room have questions? Yes.
Good question. You were talking about these boxes, and I do think we've recently moved into our house here in Salem, and I think we might even have one in our yard.
Oh.
Previous owner.
Yeah.
And is there a recommended safe way to dispose of it? Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to end that because they never catch the crosstalk that happens in the in-person part. So I just closed the Zoom. All right, so for disposal, I would use your standard hazardous waste disposal system that you probably have in your town. Like in my town, I think twice a year you can register to dispose of hazardous waste. So if you just go and look up on your town's facilities page, they'll have a process to dispose of hazardous waste, because I would consider that hazardous waste. Yeah. Yep.
Could you comment on whether you engaged with pet owners organizations at all? It seems like that could be a powerful.
Definitely. So MSPCA is a really tight ally with us on this. They helped us from the very beginning. They're part of the steering committee that works with Senator Moore and Rep. Hawkins on the bill. I mean, we meet with them all the time. They're helping plan the lobby day in July. I have a meeting with them on Thursday. They're really close with us. So we certainly worked with them. And then we have also done outreach to the wildlife rehabbers like Jess there's an association statewide that I mentioned, and I spoke at their annual conference on Saturday actually. And so we've done what we can to reach out to the rehabbers themselves, other wildlife veterinarians, and then we also have a member of the state, and I'm going to misname the association, but it's like Massachusetts Veterinarians Association, like their professional group, right? And they are part of the coalition as well, and are very familiar with it. So they get the pets in. But usually your standard, you have to really go to a full-fledged veterinary hospital that has like an ER to treat an animal a pet that's poisoned with rodenticide. Like, even though they sometimes call themselves animal hospitals, most of them don't really have the setup to run like an ER with IVs, and they will send you to a bigger city. Salem might have one, I don't know. You have an full-on animal hospital.
I just wanted to say, in addition, if you're going to do like a drive in front of Market Basket, hand out information, you might also consider PetSmart or Petco.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
It's a good place.
Yeah, they could be great allies even. I wonder if they even know. That's a really great idea.
I don't know. It would be
About it. They certainly,
someplace would go.
I mean, whether or not the
knock on
big
door.
parent company
Right.
would get involved in that type of advocacy, I don't know, but your local folks that you talk to in the local office or
Right.
local shop might.
And then
be there.
the co-op, Topsfield Co-op,
Cops.
Route 1.
Yeah, there is a group is it in Topsfield?
Yeah, it's just.
Because
over the
there's a
corner.
Save Topsfield Wildlife group that might have
Yeah,
already.
but I'm
reached
just
out to
talking
them.
about like just distributing information, like your, Market Basket Girl Scout cookies, right?
Yeah.
Go to places like that, the co-op.
And I would encourage you to get, speaking of Girl Scouts, getting youth involved. If you can get youth to speak at the city council, youth advocates, they listen to them so much more than they would to me. I'm telling you, it's amazing. They all like get quiet and are like, oh my God. So getting your youth involved, environmental clubs from the high school or Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, they are great advocates. Yeah.
I'm a veterinarian.
Oh, great.
But I had a Eco Shield come to my doorstep, and it's a pesticide. It's like a
The business just like knocked on your door?
yeah.
Yeah.
They had just taken care of someone's
A
house
neighbor.
down the street, so now they come every 3 months. But they said it was it was non-rodenticide. So
Do you know
how
what
do
it
I check
was?
that out?
Yeah, you should check out what it was.
It's called Eco Shield.
Yeah, I don't know what it is just off the top of my head, Eco Shield.
They said they they don't use rodenticides.
That's great.
It's all natural.
I'd still want to know
But
what
now
it
I
is.
want to ask them what they're using in their boxes.
Because they can call chemicals natural. Like, I don't know. I'm always suspicious until I know exactly what's in it. Yeah.
Two other things. I live in a condo where there's 4 units to a building, and recently got a message from our property manager who said, somebody in your building has called about mice and the pest control is coming, and the pest control has recommended that all 4 units be treated at the same time so the mice don't go to the other units. I said, and what will they be using? And she said, oh, I think they're probably going to use the usual poisoning. I said,
Yeah.
they're not coming here with poison. I said, have they mentioned to them to use snap traps? And they said that the woman who complained didn't want to see dead mice in her house.
Oh.
So,
You can put them, so sometimes those bait boxes have snap traps in them. You can put them in the bait box.
well, I of course said, no thank you. I have had mice over the years. I call pest control, they put snap traps in. I put my own snap traps in sometimes.
Yep. Pest control companies will put it in that plastic box. There's room for a snap trap. In fact, I have actually, and it's rare that they have snap traps. They usually have escars in them. But you can ask, and occasionally, I actually bumped into one once. A real estate company had a unlabeled bait box outside. It was right by a park playground. And when I asked, she said, oh, it has a snap trap in it. She was familiar with escar problem and didn't want to have that, but she said she didn't want the snap trap exposed. It wasn't because she didn't want to see the dead rat. She didn't comment on that, but she didn't want the kids possibly touching a snap trap, right? So, they design them so there's a gap in the middle that's big enough for a snap trap, a full big one that's a rat-sized snap trap. So you could suggest that. Yeah, question?
Cameraman has a question.
Yeah, go
So
for it.
actually, going back to the condo thing,
Yeah.
I just checked on my phone, and it was Jim Hawkins I was in touch with 3 years ago because my condo association had put the boxes with
The
that poison
Yeah.
in it, and I said, we can't do that, and they said, okay, we'll take care of it, and they didn't. So there's
Yeah, you
just-
have to advocate with the property owner. So when you're doing a campaign, you have to always think,
Well, they were. They were the problem.
well, no, but the people doing the advocacy, you have to talk to the decision maker, and you have to figure out who that is. And sometimes it takes a little research. Like Jody Swenson it was 2 foxes died in Leominster near this Whitney Field, this huge mall. It's a sprawl, right? All kinds, like often happens when there's like a little mall, then there's all these other businesses that build a huge Home Depot and Market Basket and everything. 2 foxes were found dead in the course of just like a month or 2 there. And so she, instead of going after, I think it was near Market Basket, instead of going after Market Basket, she figured out they were a tenant of a bigger property owner called Hull Properties. But she had to do some homework to get to the property owner level. And then she advocated directly with Hull Properties, polite and persistent. They didn't at first respond, but because the fox had kind of there were some pictures of it. It kind of been out there. She actually reached out to their local TV station and got them to come and do a little story about it. And the very next day after it aired, she heard from Hull Properties. Shocking. Yeah. And they removed all escars and put snap traps out in bait boxes. And she goes back periodically and checks to make sure. I don't encourage touching anyone else's, but that's what Jody does. She picks them up and wiggles them to see if it rattles from the snap trap inside will like bounce off the plastic walls and you can tell it's not bait. So anyway, that's what Jody does. But she's had some success with other big property owners like that. So you have to figure out who, in any campaign you do, you're always gonna you want to talk to the person who can actually make that decision and have tactics that impact that decision maker.
Just throwing out there, because I happen to work at a registry of deeds, that registry of deeds records are open to the public. And so you can look up leases and see who the landlord is of a particular piece of property.
Yeah, so that's good for your own, if you don't know for certain who owns your apartment buildings, because sometimes it's gonna be, sometimes if you have a manager who's on site and you know them, they might make the decision for pest control, but some of the bigger property owners, they're really absentee landlords is a thing, right? And it's harder to figure out who you need to talk to.
The Massachusetts has an interactive property map that's online.
Yes.
And if you click on a parcel, you can find the current owner. Not always easy to find where they are, but you can do that.
So this is the Rescue Raptor Toolkit. Okay, let me see if I can make my mouse go over there. And that I mentioned earlier. And you can go, these are all hyperlinks. If you click on it, you can just go to that section. So under research, because research is always the first part of doing any of this. Like for people, you happen to have a city councilor who's one of the advocates, but I have advocates who've reached out to me who didn't even know how their town worked, didn't have an advocate built into the system, an insider. And so they need to start with figuring out what form of government does your town have? Who are your town officials? Like all of that basic stuff. But I also think you can do a public record request if you need to know what's on any municipal or school properties. This is a guide for the bait box surveys that we were talking about. There's like a how-to guide and pictures and all kinds of fun stuff there. And then here's the map that you're talking about. Yeah. So it's really cool. I can geek out on maps, I have to admit. But I think this is really cool. And it's a great way, and the toolkit, what it mentions is not only does it show you, but you can find the largest tracts of public and private land in like Salem. So you kind of know who are those property owners that own the biggest chunks, right? And then you could kind of do your little survey. I don't encourage no trespassing on private property though, so you have to only be from outside the property if it's private. But you can check out and see if you know if there's escar boxes on it, or you can just reach out to them and ask. We're actually doing advocacy too with DCR. I don't know if you guys have state parks around here. Do you have a Salem State Park? No state parks in the area? Okay. Because there is not a rodent control policy prohibiting escars on state parks in Massachusetts. And we've seen hit or miss, like some had it and some didn't. It's been, advocates have gone and checked them and found some, and we were kind of surprised. We kind of assumed that they wouldn't, and turns out they sometimes did. So we're working at the top, what we call grass tops level, to try and get them to write a policy, and they've expressed interest in that, but it hasn't happened yet.
So I saw about 5 traps. It seemed like overkill in the Ropes Garden, which is a Peabody Essex property.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a woman who's the vice president of the Essex County Ornithological Club, of which I'm a member of, and these guys
Yeah.
are members of. And she's the VP, but she also works at the PEM. And so I wrote her and I said, Janie, did you know that there are, many boxes in the ropes and probably elsewhere? And so she had her folks take a look around, the ops people.
Yeah.
And they were astonished at like how many were there, and she had them all removed. So.
See, and sometimes it just takes an email. I'm telling you, I think most people just don't know. Because you obviously said in the email, do you know that these cause, secondary victim?
She
already knew
knows,
what
she's a
Esther's
birder, but yeah.
Oh, but she didn't even think about what those black boxes had in them.
She wasn't aware of it.
Yeah. No, it's really common. They either don't know what's in the box, or if they do know it's poison, they don't realize it's harming pets and wildlife. It's just, a lot of people just don't know, and it's a matter of telling them. Including your legislators. We need a lot of legislator education. Most legislators don't know what an eschar is. So we need them to also get educated. I promised them I wouldn't wander. I'm struggling with it. I naturally pace more and don't stand. I never do this behind a podium. But I'm on TV, so I'm trying to be good. Any other questions? All right. Thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate it.